Shalom Chaverim. You know, I say this, I said it last Wednesday night, the Wednesday before. It's Wednesday night. Here we are again. The weather today was rain, off and on. We need rain here in D.C. We're in a drought period. It wasn't terrible, and it was kind of a gloomy day. A little on the chilly side, but that's to be expected. We're in September, and we have some fall weather coming up. And I got my first invite for someone to join as a guest, and you know the drill. Co-host with me next Wednesday night. Send me an email. Another invite. Send me an email, rabbiblock@hotmail.com, and we'll set up our topic and how we'll talk with each other. The other option is, let me know when you're live, and then I'll click on, and then you'll see me, and then you can invite me to join you. So that would be another way to accomplish the goal. But I really would like a co-host. I really, really would. I want to begin this evening with a Midrash. You may not be familiar with the word Midrash. Midrash, the root is lidrosh, to draw out, to learn. Okay? A Midrash is not true in and of itself. It is truth. A Midrash is a way to teach a value, a lesson, or to teach how to fulfill a commandment or how to do a ritual. A parable really is a Midrash. Allegory, Midrash. Remember, Midrash is a literary term for a whole body of literature that shares using stories and legends and, like Aesop's fables, the Brothers Grimm, their fairy tales. All of this is a way to teach, to draw out what is the meaning of the text. Okay? There's a Midrash in our Passover Haggadah. The Haggadah is the book that's used during the Passover Seder to tell the story. The Midrash, the Israelites had crossed through the Sea of Reeds, and the tide had shifted, and the Egyptian army was drowning. And the people stood on the shore and heard the cries of the Egyptians drowning and dying. And the heavenly hosts broke out in song and jubilation and started singing about killing the enemy and what they did to the Hebrew people, and they should be destroyed. And God silenced the heavenly host. God silenced the heavenly host. And God said to them, "You should not be rejoicing over the death of my creation. The Egyptians are human beings. They were created in the image of God. You should not, I do not want you to rejoice in their death. They chose to follow a leader who was destructive, we all know the story of Pharaoh and the slaves and how Pharaoh even treated the Egyptians. The people chose to support and follow the Pharaoh. However, that doesn't mean we rejoice in their death." Another Midrash, same setting. The Israelites had crossed through the Sea of Reeds. They were standing on the shore, and the last person turned around and started cheering. "Go get them, God, kill them, look at what the Egyptians did." And then God silenced that individual and said the same that God said to the heavenly hosts, "There'll be no rejoicing. I have delivered you from slavery. I have set you out in the wilderness to accept the 10 Commandments, the Torah, my laws, and to lead you to the promised land. In order for that to happen, some of my own people died. The Egyptians are my people. I don't want you rejoicing. I don't want you praising. No. And so that lesson comes to mind with the shooting that just took place. Putting aside the victim's political views, his preaching, his following, we can talk about that another time. I want all of us to remember this Midrash. We don't rejoice over someone's death. And God also taught we don't elevate them. No. And that's what got me started, because a Midrash is a parable, if you will. And we're all familiar, maybe I shouldn't say we're all familiar. Many are familiar with parables. And I took out I need reading glasses. If you're looking for a really good translation, the New International Version has many different, the Study Bible, the Recovery Bible. I just have the Bible. They did a wonderful job of translation. Remember, translations are interpretations. So it's very important that the individuals who put this together were familiar with the languages, the history, and also past translations. And I happen to like the NIV. And they did a wonderful job. And so that's if you're wondering, that's what I'm using. And I'm looking at Matthew 13:10. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" Now, it's not surprising. Jesus was a preacher. Born a Jew, died a Jew. He went to the synagogue in Copernicus. Ramban Gamliel was one of his teachers. And so they use the word parable. A Midrash is a parable. There are parables in the Midrash. Remember, the word Midrash is kind of a technical term, like a sofa, a couch, a divan. You come over to visit me and you go, "That's a lovely sofa you have." And I say, "No, it's a couch." Then you turn and say, "Well, that's a lovely couch." And I go, "No, that's a sofa." And we look at each other, and neither one of us are interior designers. So sofa, couch, divan have technical meanings. However, we all know what they are. We all know it when we see it. So if you were to call a sofa, a couch, a divan, it's the same thing. Because we're not dealing with the technicalities of the size, the shape of the arms or the legs. So parables and allegories are Midrash. And the word Midrash is a technical term for a whole body of literature. So Jesus used Midrash. He spoke in parables. He says it. I speak in parables. And as we move on into Mark, we find the parable of the sower, the parable of the growing seed, the parable of the mustard seed. So we find that Jesus used a parable, which means we're not to take them literally. They are truth and not true. They didn't happen. It's something preachers use in order to get point across, in order to teach the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. That's why Jesus says, I speak in parables. The parable of the weeds, the parable of the net, the parable of the mustard seed. Okay? And so we find that Midrash parables are very much a part of being a preacher. And then I decided to take a look at, because I see a lot of questions here. And when someone says to me, I accept the Christ, I accept Jesus, I live Jesus, then I turn to the Beatitudes. I turn to the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus' own words. When I read a politician who says he lives Jesus, who he follows Christian teachings, I turn to the Sermon on the Mount. Where else should I go? I turn to the Beatitudes, for those are Jesus' words. Now, I'm not comparing the speaker or the writer to Jewish teachings, Jewish values. Now, remember I did the series, Make America Good Again, and we compared the three Abrahamic religions, and then we put in Islam, and then we put in Buddhism and Hinduism. Islam is one of the Abrahamic. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the three Abrahamic religions. And then I added in Hinduism and Buddhism. And we saw that we all share values. There are different customs and traditions, but we share the values. And in my mind, that's what the Sermon on the Mount is. That's what the Beatitudes are. Values. Okay? And we have lots of literature in Judaism. The Talmud is a collection of rabbinic discussion. Some of it's absurd, some of it's ridiculous, but it's not Jewish law, and none of us have to follow it. One of the beauties of Judaism that we don't have in other religions is we've published stupid things. We've published things that aren't Jewish in the Talmud. That's because this idea of democracy, of the First Amendment, the rabbis believed that if something was discussed, it should be written down and passed on. Everyone should be aware of some of these stupid things, and the idea was we'll talk away, we'll get rid of them by talking about them, or they'll just disappear. None of them hold the weight of law. I'm not bound by any of them. Judaism is based upon teachings, not of any one individual. So that makes it very difficult to come up with something like the Beatitudes or the Sermon on the Mount. And for those of you interested, on my YouTube channel, The Rabbi and I, many years ago, I did a series, I don't know how long it was, on the Sermon on the Mount and Jewish values. Almost every single parallel. But again, it's not surprising. Jesus, Rabbi, the term wasn't used then, but he was a teacher. And so he's going to be using the Jewish teachings. And then when I read some of your comments, and then when I read something a politician has to say, I open up my Bible, to make no mistake, and I read the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. And I look at blessed are the peacemakers, and then I read comments by our politicians, by TikTokers, that incite murder, incite rioting, are contrary to peace. And then I have to scratch my head and say, that individual really needs to read what they profess to believe. Not from me. Talk to your pastor. See what they say about the Beatitudes. And then there's the Sermon on the Mount. Remember, the Beatitudes kind of provide an introduction to the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus begins by saying, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of the pen will any means disappear from the law." Which is why when I did my series on the Sermon on the Mount and Jewish values, they line up. Rituals can be different reminders from our religions. But when we look, we find one of the first discussions is one that's mistranslated in the Ten Commandments. The Hebrew says, "Thou shalt not murder." Killing in war, all kinds of things. The commandment is very explicit. And Jesus, that's the next thing he jumps to when he says, "Do not murder." Do not murder. That means taking the life of another human being with malice aforethought and malicious intent. With a hunting rifle, with a high-powered rifle, with a sniper rifle, you're committing murder. When someone pursues you to kill you or hurt you, you can defend yourself and you can kill them because your life is at risk. You're going to stop them. If I see someone killing or attempting to kill someone else, I'm obligated to use the least amount of force to stop them. It's called the law of the pursuer. Murder is waiting in ambush, is picking out someone you disagree with and murdering them. I'm appalled by the large number of Christians who want to kill liberals, whatever that means, who want to kill people who disagree with them, and yet they claim that they're Christian. I'm befuddled. Okay? It's do not murder. Now, do not commit adultery. Right in the Ten Commandments. And just parenthetically, I am honored and thrilled that the politicians in the great state of Texas have decided to post from the most sacred document, the Ten Commandments. I would have thought the Christian politicians in Texas would have posted the Beatitudes. I thought they would have posted the Sermon on the Mount, the words of Jesus. But no. The individuals in Texas have chosen to place the words of Moses, my teacher, Moshe Rabbeinu. And according to the tradition, I was ordained by someone who was ordained going back to a chain to Moses. So I'm thrilled that out of our most sacred literature and one of our most sacred documents, the Ten Commandments, has been chosen by Christians to put in schools. And I want to thank them for choosing something Jewish. I mean, just think about it. Wouldn't we have thought that they would have picked, like I said, the Beatitudes or Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' own words? But no, they recognize that the Jewish teachings are over and above, just like Jesus began. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. And so I'd like to thank our politicians in the great state of Texas for deciding to help people fulfill. So Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't break an oath. Don't break a promise that you made to God. Now, that's not the same as you might say to your partner, or you might say to your husband, your wife, your boss. No. And that also goes back to the Ten Commandments. Jesus is following the Ten Commandments with the Sermon on the Mount. What we're looking at is don't use God's name in an oath if you're not going to keep it. That's what it means by in vain. Don't say, I'm doing God's work by killing these people. I'm doing God's work by saying you shouldn't listen. I'm doing the work by inciting people to violence. Okay? I would love to speak to Netanyahu. He won't listen to me. He's a politician on the wrong track. I don't like the way he's leading the state of Israel. I don't like the way Putin is leading Russia. I think that's headed in a very wrong and dangerous direction. And there's a lot of politicians I disagree with. But I'm just a little old country rabbi. And I have my podcasts, my YouTube channel. I have you who tune in on Wednesday nights, who look at my TikToks I post, who then go back and look at some of the older. But politicians don't talk to me. Love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Wow. Again, when someone says that they're a Christian, this ain't a public, I'm not labeling anyone. I see it in the newspaper. I hear it on the TV. I hear it on podcasts. And I listen to them. And they spew hate for people who disagree with them. And I scratch my head and I go, yes, I am reading from, someone said you're reading from the Bible. Yes. And that's why I put up the NIV. Wonderful, wonderful, readable, faithful to both the Greek and the Hebrew. I use the NIV when I study Torah. Because they've done such a wonderful job of translating, of looking at other commentaries, and not having an agenda that they're pushing. They're scholars. But that's one that totally befuddles me, by the way. I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. That's right out of the Midrash, I told you. When God silenced the heavenly host, he said, you're not to rejoice at the death of your enemy. Stop it. It had to be, it was part of the plan, and you're not to rejoice. Yet, that's one I see violated over and over. And again, I'm using this evening to tell you some of the things I've been reading and some of the things, there's sin on all sides, you're absolutely right. And it doesn't speak for the whole religion, absolutely. And I don't condemn Christianity, as some people condemn Judaism for what Netanyahu's doing. I don't do that. I don't do that. No. And I would never use this to condemn. I'm talking about individuals, not the religion. If I could, I would ask everyone to live their religion, not what someone tells them their religion is. I use the term naked religion. Follow naked Buddhism, naked Hinduism, naked Judaism, naked Christianity, without all the barnacles and dressing and political stuff. That is my prayer and wish. That each of us actually live the teachings. I haven't found one Now, maybe you want to write me an email. No, I don't thank God. Yeah, I love that blessing. It's not just in the Talmud. It's in the Orthodox prayer book, by the way. There's a Orthodox prayer. That's why I'm not Orthodox. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who did not make me a woman. And that's why I'm not Orthodox. I don't agree with that idea or concept. And that's one of the features of Judaism is we don't have chief rabbis, even though you could say to me, there's a chief rabbi of the UK, a chief rabbi of Israel. There are two of them, a Sephardic and an Ashkenazic. You can't have two chiefs. They're pure political. And I've mentioned before, my real title, I am Chief Rabbi of Western Fairfax County, Virginia. So I'm a chief rabbi. We don't have anyone that can say, this is what you have to believe, this is right, this is wrong. We present the teachings. And Jews as individuals have to make some tough decisions. And many of them have made decisions that the rest of us shake our heads and says, that's not Jewish. What you're doing in Gaza is not Jewish. What you're doing in the West Bank is not Jewish. And I've said it. I've done podcasts on that. I've done YouTubes on that. However, Israel is a country. It's going to be here. And the government will change. And the country's going to have to live with. And you can find in any religion, someone can say, if you don't belong to my religion, you're not a person, you're not a human being, you're less. We have that in Judaism. We have Jews pointing to non-Jews and saying they're less than us. They can say that. It's what they say, but it's not a Jewish belief. And that sometimes confuses things because Jews will make pronouncements. And then some people accept what they're saying as if it's a teaching of all Judaism. It's an opinion. It's a person. And that's why I want you to listen to me. Remember, I just want to remind everyone, I like the motto from the Marines, and I like to say there are two ways to be Jewish, the wrong way and my way. And if you want to know my way to be Jewish, you have to get the book. Available online at Barnes & Noble, available online at Amazon, available online at your local bookseller. You go in, you tell them, they'll order it for you. They'll have it for you in 2 days. And the cartoons. The cartoons are worth the price of the book. And I showed this one last week. If you buy enough copies, and if you follow me on TikTok, then that could be Joe. Joe's the I. And there I am. We could be in a really neat studio instead of here in the guest room study with my friend Tony. We could be in one of those neat studios. So please, just remember, when you start asking me questions about, doesn't it say in the Talmud, or do Jews do this, or what's that passage in the Talmud that says these awful things about, well, somebody put their opinion in, non-binding, and it's stupid. That's it. I'll tell you, there's only two ways to be Jewish, the wrong way and my way. Thank you for spending this 30 minutes with me. And I look forward to you joining me next week. And once again, a reminder, email. No, there are no mitzvahs in the word mitzvah. I'll have to do a session on mitzvah because it's kind of deceiving. Thank you all. Lila Tov.